Shep Naz podcast begins now.
Welcome to the Shep Naz podcast.
Hold on, Joe. Hold on.
Yes.
Listen. Now I know that this is probably potentially the first time that this has ever happened on the Shep Naz podcast, but today the tables have turned.
They've turned tables.
So, shall we start over? Welcome to the Shep Naz podcast.
Well, wait, if we're going to start over.
The Shep Naz podcast begins now.
Welcome to the Shep Naz podcast. So excited you're here. I'm Pastor Zack, and I have the privilege today of being joined by Noah and Joe.
And guess what day it is?
Worship Wednesday. Come on now.
All right.
I love it. Well,
Welcome in, Joe.
Hey.
welcome. It's so exciting to have you here
Thanks for having me.
on this podcast for the first time.
I'm a little nervous.
You should be. You should be. Well, you guys who are listening or watching are probably going, what on earth is happening right now?
The world has just turned upside down.
Right? Thinking Zach's officially lost it. It's happening. What is going on? Well, today on Worship Wednesday, we had an idea. Thankfully, Joe was cool enough to let us run with our wacky ideas sometimes.
Yes.
And so when here at Worship Wednesday, we've talked a lot about what worship is. And specifically, we have looked at worship in the context of music and what happens on the platform. But as we've also discussed, that worship is not just music. Worship is not just what somebody does with an instrument in their hand. Worship is a lifestyle. And so we kind of wanted to flip the script a little bit today. And we actually want to dig into the mind of the tech side of worship.
Oh.
And who better for this first episode with this platform format?
Are you looking for a list?
Yeah. I was gonna say, this is going to be a 17-part interview.
No, I mean, who better?
Oh no, you're the man. You're the man. This will not be the only time we do this because we are so blessed with an amazing team of technologically minded people that make everything happen behind the scenes. But we really want to dig in today. What does it look like when we think of the word worship behind the scenes? Because so often we look at worship as what we see on the cameras or when we look at the live stream or what we see on the platform. But without tech, a lot of stuff wouldn't happen on the platform. There would be no live stream. We wouldn't see stuff on the camera. So, Joe, would you mind maybe just scratching the surface and we can get a little more detailed? Like, when you think of worship through tech, what is the first thing that comes to mind for you?
Well, I think primarily we are a support role. And as we're worshiping through tech, our role is to remove distractions so that the people that are walking into the service can really hone in and focus on what's happening. And so worship for us, it definitely takes, we can kind of dissect that, but it takes a lot of different roles. But I'd say the first role is our primary focus is there to serve the other ministries and to make sure that we're trying to remove as much distraction as possible to help other people worship.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of times people don't understand the amount of tech that goes into what we do. And not just on a Sunday morning, but literally every day in almost every ministry of our church. So maybe we can dissect that a little bit, maybe to start. So let's start with what a Sunday morning looks like. You know, what are the roles that take place behind the scenes, and how many people does it take? Can you dig into that a little bit?
Sure. I'll try to get as much out as quick as possible for you.
You good?
So you might see Jason, Josh, and I not often all in the same place at the same time, at least on Sundays. But we actually do serve some different functions. I mean, I know just by outside appearances, it's like one tech guy is the same as another tech guy, but we actually do serve some different functions.
Yep.
So out front in the sanctuary, normally you'll see somebody running the soundboard out there. We call that front of house. And that's because they're running sound for the people that are in the sanctuary. And then we'll also have somebody in that booth. Typically, you'll see Karen Moss back there during first service, and she's doing the online greeting and kind of hosting from there. We also have Scott Winfield that does that from home, and Sarah Bowser that does it from wherever she is. And sometimes we'll have another person back there in the booth that's running lights, depending on the Sunday, depending on how thin we're stretched. Maybe that person that's doing sound is also doing lights back there, but that happens back in the booth. We have 2 camera positions back there in the center part. Most of the time, both of those cameras are run by one person, and one's a tight shot camera and the other's kind of a wide shot camera. We have another camera operator by the sanctuary entry door, and we refer to that as Cam 3, and that's an angle shot. So we have those positions inside, and then you'll see a couple people that float in and out. We have mobile cams that we run during the worship set part. And so we'll have 1 or 2, depending on the Sunday, to run mobile cams. Then behind the wall, we have the control room, and a lot of people have been through there. Some people maybe not. If you're really curious, just knock on the door someday, and we'll let you in. But back in the control room, we have somebody that's running screens. So the stuff that you're seeing on the big screen in the sanctuary, the stuff that's on the back screen that the people that are on the stage are looking at. And there's also screens at their feet that they're looking at. And there's graphics that are going out to the live stream. That's all coming from a computer in the control room that somebody's running. We have somebody that's running what we call the switcher, which is picking the different cameras, and those feeds are going either to the live stream or to the Johnstown feed that they're going to be using, for their service. And then we also have somebody that is running stream audio. And what stream audio is, just like you had somebody in the sanctuary running front of house sound, mixing the sound for the people that are in the sanctuary, we have a completely different mix, a sound engineer that's running sound to mix it for the live stream. We may have a couple more people floating around that are either serving as coordinators to make sure everything's happening the way it is, or a fireman putting out fires or whatever decides to break that morning. And then just real quickly, we have, up in Johnstown, we'll have somebody that's running slides up there and somebody that's running sound up there, and sometimes a third, depending on what the day looks like.
Absolutely.
So that was the rundown of the list.
It's a big list.
That's Sunday morning.
Absolutely. Well, something that I wanted to hit on, and then Noah, if you don't mind, and you can be thinking about it while I'm sharing this, what is the role of tech really changed for our experience up at Johnstown recently, as we kind of touched on in last week's episode with some of the new technology that we've been implementing at Johnstown. But one of the things that I love about Joe, Josh, and Jason and the leadership that they have is, like you just heard, that's a lot of positions to fill, right? And what I love about the tech ministry in particular is that it is not just an opportunity to fill an empty space. We're not just looking for warm bodies, right? But it's been so cool to watch the way that you guys bring people into the tech ministry of all ages. I think Enju's in 6th grade, going into 7th grade, maybe.
Right.
And we got some people that are in their 50s, 60s, whatever age they are. I mean, it's just a full spectrum. And the amount of discipleship that goes in to these experiences is that we're not just leading people in technology, but you guys are leading people towards Jesus in the way that they serve. And I think that's really important to hit. And I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit more, but something that hopefully people have gathered from these conversations is, worship is a lifestyle. And so we can worship in everything we do by doing it with excellence.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know if you want to touch a little bit more on that or not.
I mean,
but
and I've used this analogy before. I don't know if I've used it on the podcast, but I think back to even kind of the early church when cathedrals were being built and stained glass was being put in. It was for the common person at the time. They didn't have that kind of stuff at their house. Yeah. And so like when you went to church, you saw the best in art, and it was really presenting the best that society had to offer to God in worship. And so in many of the same ways, people will be like, why do you have to have smoke in this? And it's like, well, we're doing those things that we think can enhance the worship experience. Like many, many times we've heard people say, man, I love just seeing the rays come through the glass and just that atmosphere that it creates and just the beauty of the colors. And it's like, and that's why we put the haze, because otherwise the rays are invisible. But when we put particulate in the air, you can actually see them. Yep. And so we do those kinds of things. And for me, it's I'm able to worship through offering to God back to whatever skills and abilities that I have. An example that I just really was blessed by is that, even on Tuesday nights, it's not just a Sunday morning thing. On Tuesday nights, we'll have some support people here to make sure practices are going the way they're supposed to go. And one of our newer volunteers, one actually as a result from the expo, was Chelsea Thompson. And she's been real faithful about coming in and trying to learn new things and helping out with the slides and everything. And last Tuesday night, she was in there running slides, and you guys were in the sanctuary singing. And she's in the control room by herself. I'm walking in and out because we're trying to get some other stuff done on tech during that time period. But she's literally just singing at the top of her lungs and clapping and raising her hands and praising the Lord while she is hitting the space bar to go to the next slide. And that is the epitome of what we want to do as a tech team, to be able to worship through what we're doing.
100%, man. 100%.
So as we're more modern in our technology as a church, and we've been blessed with a lot of things. I mean, just like you've mentioned. So how do you, as the kind of person who puts stuff together and implements new things, how do you not make it a distraction for yourself as well, and not get caught up behind? Because we've talked about, it's cool to have like a click track and pedals and stuff, but it can get distracting at times, and you have to learn how to use it to enhance it and not get as a distraction. So how do you use that as a tech, as a enhancement and as a gift instead of a distraction?
Well, for me personally, there's a couple different ways I attack that. There's, say for example, if I'm out in front of house running sound, even though I'm running sound, I'll take a step back from the board once I feel like, okay, everything's flowing the way it is, and I'm going to sing. I'm going to participate in the worship just like everybody else is. It's a little more challenging, like if you're directing the live stream, because you have an intercom on, you're instructing people what they need to do constantly, and so sometimes you're not hearing every single word that's going on. You're telling people, you're looking at multiple different camera shots and trying to decide what's going to happen next in the service and what are you going to. And part of it for me is I in some ways come pre-worshipped. Okay, and I am worshiping through this, and I have the advantage and the opportunity that many times whoever's speaking that Sunday, I get the chance to talk to them about their sermon before they actually preach it. So I've kind of already heard it that time, and then when I'm processing the podcast, I'm hearing it another time, and then I'm also hearing it through when the service is going on, and then also when we're reprocessing it after the fact and posting it. So not all of my worship takes place at one time. And so for me, and that is a thing that you have to learn how to juggle, is that I may not eat that meal all in one sitting. I may have a little bit of an hors d'oeuvre here, and then I'll have the salad, and then I'll have the main course, and I take it throughout the day or throughout the week, but try to do that as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, I think it's important throughout the week too. I mean, if what you're only encountering God is on a Sunday morning, that's a very shallow way to live and a very shallow way to worship. And even as worship leaders and tech directors, and we necessarily on a Sunday morning, we're we're pouring out so much that it's important for us to get poured into throughout the week as well. That way we can give in abundance and not necessarily need to be filled on a Sunday, because that's not really our job per se. So
yeah, absolutely. And I know, Joe, you've mentioned that in the podcast too, of like what we experience on Sunday. You've mentioned this too, Noah. It's like what we experience on Sunday is an overflow of what we experience throughout the week, coming in worshiped up,
Right.
And especially in our roles, everybody sitting around this table and all the volunteers, the amazing volunteers that give up so much time every single week for all of us to come in ready to do that.
Yeah.
And if all we're doing is showing up just to serve and not to worship through service, then that's draining, and that's how you get burnt out. That's how you don't want to do it anymore, because we're not here to just use people.
Right.
And there's a lot of churches, and I've talked to a lot of, especially worship leaders and tech people that they've had that experience of, well, anytime I went, it was just, they just used me for my gifts. They just used me. And it's like, well, if we're not getting worshiped up to where we can go and be used by God, not just by people, but be used by God through the gifts and talents, I think that's really, really important. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, and I would also add to that kind of that rhythm of service that you're talking about. And, I think it's very healthy and normal for our team where we might schedule, Josh does our scheduling for that and gets kind of all the teams organized, but he's very sensitive to the other ministries that people are involved in. And like we have many people that are on tech and worship, and so some Sundays they're doing tech, some Sundays they're doing worship, some Sundays they just need to sit down. And so we try to be sensitive to that. And different people have a different rhythm. For some people, like I want to serve every single week, and I feel like I'm being underutilized if I don't. Other people are like, you know what, I need, maybe 2 Sundays a month, I want to serve in that role, but then I need to take a step back and maybe be with my family. And so all of those things, we can kind of accommodate those rhythms to make sure that it's tailored to that person.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And well, I'll even applaud you, Joe, because I'm not a huge tech guy. I don't really as knowledgeable as you guys, but I mean, Zach even got a text yesterday from a fellow we've known for a while how open you guys are about the tech and how you guys will pour into people. And like you mentioned, Chelsea comes and you guys pour into her and teach her, and Angie, all these people. And that's not happening at other churches. We just got a text that a gentleman went and had a horrible experience because the tech guys were, and he's a phenomenal tech guy, and was pretty much pushed away and told, kind of just smirked off. And so I appreciate your guys' openness and even pouring into me, just teaching me. So yeah, just want to applaud you for that.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably driven out of necessity because we need help.
Insert volunteer plug here.
No, but all kidding aside, there's no trade secrets as far as we're concerned. Like, yes, combined between Josh, Jason, and I, there's a lot of experience there. And so we've seen a lot of things. We've encountered a lot of things. We've learned from our own mistakes, from other people's mistakes. And there's no guarded secrets. If you want to serve, we're going to throw you in and we'll teach you everything we know. As much as we can.
Yep. Yeah, you kind of beat me to the punch. I was going to say something similar, but I'm glad you did, because like one of my favorite things is how often on Sundays I'll just see one of you guys just walking somebody we've never met before around the tech room and just being like, hey, this is so-and-so, they just want to check it out. And, they might even just be curious of like, what is even behind this door? Or it could be like, I'm interested, but there's always a willingness of like, come on back. Let's talk about it. Let's show you what happens back here.
Yeah.
So I think one of the last things I want to touch on, if that's okay with you, this is my first time hosting.
I will
Joe.
wait till press the button until you tell me to.
Thank you, Joe.
We got another hour.
Yeah, exactly. So let me get out my notebook here, 75 notes. So we had mentioned, things like cameras. And the amount of cameras we have in the room. We've got some that are mobile and they walk around the front. Some are in the back. We have people who are specifically switching camera shots, and specifically for the live stream and to what goes out to Johnstown on the weeks that Nick is not preaching live.
Yep.
I have been blown away at the amount of care and attention that you guys have given to our online campus and our online ministry. And I guess I just wanted you to kind of maybe explain a little bit more of the heart behind that and why, there's a lot of churches that have an online experience, right? But using things like Altar Live, where we're actually being extraordinarily intentional on we want to treat online as another campus of our church,
right,
and not just an opportunity for people to watch it later, but we want the people online to feel like they're just as part of the family as anybody who walks through the front door. So can you maybe just speak into that a little bit more?
Sure. I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of controversy, I would say, in the church, not our church personally, but in the church as a whole, in the United States and even globally, about what is the role of a digital campus or an online church. And many people have, made an argument that, like, well, if it's not in person, it's not real, and that, church was never meant to be done in isolation.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with the very last statement, that church was never intended to be done in isolation. And so we could take the opinion that, well, you either come in person or you're not one of us. And I don't think that's automatically going to make everybody that's watching online say, well, I guess we got to go.
Yeah.
I think the reality is they just stop.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always mean for a particular individual that online is just a stepping stone to go to in-person church. I think that's also a fallacy that, although it may be true for some people, their first exposure to a church, and nowadays probably most likely their first exposure to a church, is going to be whatever they present as their live stream.
Yeah.
And that's why we try to do our very best. We're very particular. Don't say we get it all perfect, but we are very conscious of the fact that if people are seeking the church, they're probably going to say, well, let's see what they do. Before I walk through this door, let's see what goes on inside that building. Yep. And so we try to be very conscious of that fact to make sure that we're giving our very best to the Lord and also presenting Him in the best light possible, so that this would be a place where people would want to come.
Yeah.
But I also believe that there is a certain amount of people that online will be their church. And it could be for a host of different reasons. And some reasons people may be more comfortable with than others. But, you take, for example, I'll give you my mom, for example. She's had some physical problems. And although her preference is to be in person, that's not always the case for her. Yeah. But this allows her to be able to participate. And she logs in, she chats with the people online, she participates in service just like she would if she was walking in through the front door. Yeah. For other people, it may not be necessarily a health concern. There may be a host of other reasons why this is their connection point. So then it becomes a matter of not where are we, but how do we do this? And it is important that we do recognize and acknowledge that our faith is to be done in community. That's the way we are to disciple each other, hold each other accountable. And so if that means that we're chatting with each other, or we're having online Bible studies, or it doesn't mean that just because we aren't physically in the same place that we can't foster that same kind of community and connection.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's awesome, Joe. Thank you so much for everything you guys do. Yeah, go ahead and hit that button.
I'm supposed to push the button?
Yeah, hit the button now.
All right, say the exit stuff.
I was going to say, I don't know if I remember it. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on the Shepnez podcast. We'd love to hear from you, and hopefully you got out of today, when we're talking about this stuff, that, again, worship is not just music. You can worship through anything you're doing, and I know that our tech team really worships. So we'd love to hear from you guys. If you are ever interested in volunteering, please reach out to us at Shepnez podcast.
Email podcast@shepnaz.org.
That's the one. Email
Follow us on
podcast.
Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. For Pastor Zach, for Noah, I'm Joe. Goodbye. This podcast is a production of the Shepherd Church of the Nazarene, Gahanna, Ohio. Email to podcast@shepnaz.org and let us know what you think.